I had always assumed the way to God was to deny your humanity and embrace your divinity.
Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Okay.
And then I realized that the way to truth might be through acknowledging the fullness of where I found myself to be, which was my humanity and my divinity.
Cannot be plugged in and listen to myself and walk away.
And not reverence it or judge it. Just appreciate it. Just allow it. Allow my humanity.
Standing's a weird vibe.
So I have gotten to the point now where I am what I am much more. And some people like it and some people don't like it. And if they like it, that's their problem. And if they don't like it, that's their problem. I don't take it all on myself and as much.
Recording something like this makes me big nervous. It's like every fiber in my being except for one says don't do it. It's tough to make a video where you talk about not talking about things. So let's start maybe at the beginning. I haven't made much in the way of content for the last few years. And I honestly miss it. And I've realized that I have like a really bad case of the yips with it. This really deep-seated fear that really pushes me back into my own head. It keeps me from doing anything. It rationalizes itself in circles and has all these reasons why I shouldn't. Why I shouldn't share my experience, why I don't know what I'm talking about, why if I share, people will see how bad I am, how dumb I am, how big an amateur I am, how whiny I am. Maybe you have a voice like this, but mine's brutal. And I think this voice started for me back growing up in the church, which I feel like is a very like stereotypical thing, but it's true at least for me. I remember getting in trouble for playing John Mayer at youth group because it wasn't Christian enough, and for some reason that memory, I just can't let it go. It's like that eternal fear that you're stepping on someone's toes by saying something, by creating something, by loving something. I remember when my dad found the Under Oath CD that a friend had burned for me, he smashed it into a million tiny pieces. And when he found the modern translation of the Bible that I had gotten, it was this thing called The Message, and it was signed by the guy who translated it. He threw it out because it was like heretical or something. When I started listening to what some would call angstier music, I remember I came home one day, and this was in the middle of my parents' separation, and my dad was wearing a Slipknot t-shirt and like one of those spiky like Hot Topic dog collars, and said something to the effect of like, I just want to be cool like you. But it was so clear that he didn't want to be cool like me. And there are so many of those little interactions that just stack up on you, where you question, like, is who I am really that bad? Is being interested in these things really that bad? Is stepping outside this tiny constrictive box of someone else's comfort zone really that dangerous? And like the worst part is, like, as scary as it is to be the person doing that, the harder part is other people's reactions to it. it's not the you being willing to step out and stand up for something or say, hey, this doesn't really work for me. It's everyone else trying to like tear you apart. But that's a part of the deal, I guess. One of the things that I've just come to learn is that as you grow and change and expand, some people are going to be here for it and some people aren't. And so those things bothered me, but I somehow carried on, and my music dreams shifted more into an art dream and a graphic design dream, and the next thing you knew I was doing photo and video work. And it didn't take very long to get attacked there. I started entering the online film community, started learning from other people, and started wanting to share my own experience. Doing YouTube videos, being engaged on Twitter. You know, I was doing gear reviews for Lens Pro to Go. I was doing my own YouTube channel. Maybe some of you were there for that, but I remember just getting DMs from multiple people, like people who I respected, whether or not they were like the biggest people in the world, like people who were influencers in the space, who would DM me at 2 a.m. and be like, you really just need to talk less, because I can't tell you who, but we all don't like you and what you're saying. And you know, it's just weird. Like, honestly, like in hindsight, it's like, I don't know who says that kind of thing to people, especially to like a kid, basically. But like, it happened multiple times. And one of those people apologized to me years later, and he said, hey, I'm sorry, I was like insecure and drinking a lot and just lashing out at you for being in the spotlight or whatever. And it's like, I appreciate that, but it didn't help at the time. And this other person has like still sort of continued the beef. And I'm sure that I somehow like inadvertently fed into that, but I feel like I'm a pretty transparent person. Like, I'm open to feedback and criticism. I think at this point, one of my character flaws is that I'm like criminally honest. I'm not looking to hide anything here. But just getting like attacked by people on the internet. I remember one of the best YouTube comments I ever got was someone being like, the information you're sharing is great, but your voice makes me want to find where you are, drive to you, and kill you. And like, that's another one that it's like, I don't know, I feel like you should be able to just shake it off, but maybe it was because of my prior experiences. It was just like, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe my voice is too big a problem. Maybe me liking non-CCM music is a problem. Maybe me wanting to share my experience is a problem. Maybe me having opinions on things is a problem. And like, I somehow kept going, but I just remember like the foundation was getting shakier and shakier. I don't know. It's like there's this funny thing about like an abandonment wound, I guess, where it's like it keeps shaking its head at you until you're really willing to look at it. So I continued making content. I continued sharing what I could with everyone I could, always being super transparent, being willing to share my client meetings, budgets, rates, phone calls, just being like, I want people to see what I'm doing for their benefit and also for my benefit. Like, I think this is how this stuff can go, but like, I'm very open to feedback, and I'm a big fan of transparency. And I learned that not everyone's a big fan of transparency, and I don't really get that, like this fear of honesty or exposure thing. But yeah, it's another theme which will tie back to what happened today. So in the midst of all this content creating, community running, event hosting, and getting chirped at by people, getting YouTube comments that my voice was too bad, getting tweets from other influencers that I needed to stop because all the people who were actually working in the industry didn't like me. I got messages that like, hey, if you keep doing these YouTube videos, you're going to ruin your career as a filmmaker. Just like weird threats, and not like, hey, we want to help you, here's how to encourage you, but just like weird threats. And I don't get that. I don't get how people did that to kids in the church. I don't get how people do this to other people in our industry. Like, there's no part of me that wants to threaten someone. I have a hard enough time just presenting like constructive criticism to people. And maybe that's my weakness, is that like I'm not hard enough on people sometimes and not blunt enough, but like just continually getting chirped like, hey, if you keep doing this, you're gonna fail. This sort of like existential threat of like, whether it's if you keep listening to this music, God's gonna hate you, or the church is gonna leave you, or whatever else, or if you keep making this content, like the industry is never gonna accept you. And like all of it just coming from me out of a perspective of love and like wanting to share and wanting to learn. So when I finally made the decision that I had to step away from content creation, I'd repeatedly said like, hey, this is burning me out. I had asked for ways to do support. I had made it very clear to the community, like, hey, this isn't working for me. And if we can't figure something out, it's going to have to stop. And I finally pulled the plug on it one day. You know, I woke up, and I've told this story before, but took my Patreon, my podcast, my blog, Facebook group, and I just sort of shut it all down. Unfollowed everyone on Instagram, did a total blackout. And one of the first things that I got was messages from people that were like, you're never going to work in this industry again. You're being so selfish. How could you do this to us? I remember I got a kid who messaged me and was like, hey man, I just wanted you to know that I really looked up to you, and you unfollowing me on Instagram is so fucked up. And that was just hard. Like now it's silly, but at the time it was hard. It was like, dude, I'm already like trying to make a hard decision to take care of myself and my family. And people are lashing out at me and saying that like this is the end of my career. Like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. And that hard decision of having to like pick something. The hard decision of having to go like, hey, this whole like church community thing isn't really a great community and it's not serving me anymore, and I'm just gonna bounce. And having people be so weirdly existentially threatened by that. You know, saying like, hey, some of these industry practices, like I don't really agree with them, and I think we should have a conversation about it. And people being like, hey, if you talk about that, it's never gonna be okay. You're never gonna be accepted. Saying, hey, like, if I keep doing this thing where I'm over leveraging myself to help other people and I'm not getting anything out of it, my whole life's gonna fall apart, and I think I need to stop. And people are like, well, then you're never gonna work again. It's like, man, you wish it didn't have to be that way, but I guess life just be like that sometimes. So I took a break. People sent me, you know, career-ending threats and were really mad that they got unfollowed on Instagram, but I took the break. So there's the church season of shame and pain and existential threats and abandonment. Then there's the stuff with my dad, which culminated, as I've talked about before, and for me at least, it culminated in me threatening to kill myself if my dad left again, and him walking out the door. Which, like, if that doesn't seal the deal on your abandonment wound, I don't know what will. And so then that continued into me finding my way into the film industry and making content, and having some of the top other like influencers that I knew and respected telling me that like, hey, you need to shut up or you're going to ruin your career. Not being able to tell me why, not being able to tell me what I was doing wrong, but just sort of generally being like, if you keep doing what you're doing, it's not going to go well for you. And then I finally left my content creation and went back to production, and had 2 production companies ghost me. Totally ghost me. I didn't do anything wrong that I'm aware of. And so I think that's honestly when I sort of went back more underground again, and was just like, I don't really want to work with people anymore. I don't really want to put myself out there anymore. I don't want to try to teach people anymore. I don't want to try and push the edge of my artistic interests anymore, because it seems like every time I put my neck out there, it just gets bit in the hell off. And then last year, I decided, hey, I want to come back and just like share some of my experience that hopefully can help other people. After being in the film industry for over 10 years, like I'm going to talk about some of the stuff that I really wish I had known. And some of the stuff that's like goofy and just predatory that happens. And I started sharing that, And got a phone call from a director who was like, again, you shouldn't talk about this. You're ruining the industry. You're so whiny. You're so bitter. That just shows that you're working on shitty projects, yada, 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 yada. And I remember getting off that phone call and I was just shaking. It was like the adrenaline of like literally anything I say. I didn't out anyone. I've never outed anyone. Like I've kept everyone's names private who's ever done any of this stuff to me. I've never publicly bashed anyone. I've talked about some of the circumstances in the context of teaching other people, and I've had people see that. Like this director didn't even follow me, but somehow I had talked about something I'd heard of, and he was all set off. And so then today, I was sharing something about a deal memo I had been sent. And it wasn't an attack on the company. It wasn't like, it was super abstract, and the company doesn't follow me. Company owner doesn't follow me, but I'd shared to my story like, hey, here's some reasons that I disagreed to this thing, which I had told the company, like, I don't agree with this deal memo. And then on my stories, I said, here's why. And they emailed me and they were like, this is so surreal that you would talk badly about us on Instagram, and like, you have a reputation that precedes you, and I guess if you wanted to like get a fast payment but a bridge burned, you've succeeded. And at this point, I just laugh about it, man. It's like, I didn't attack you. No one knows I'm talking about you. These parts of your contract I don't agree with, and I'm allowed to talk about that. And if you don't like it, that's fine. If you want to say that I have a reputation, I would love to know what that reputation is, because my understanding is that as much as I am a human being who is imperfect, like, I've generally been a like open book, a collaborative person, an honest person. I'm someone who fights for people to get paid on time, to get taken care of. And the people who don't take care of people don't like that, and I get it. And the people who don't want like their shitty practices to be seen are insecure about that, and I get it. But it doesn't have to be that way. There are other people I've talked to. Wilson Lemieux is a great example. Like, his dudes walk away from set with checks. There's no reason everyone has to be net 30 to net 60. You know, these deal memos that say like, hey, everything is super confidential and you're not allowed to talk about anything involved in any part of this production with anyone ever, is like, yeah, they probably don't want you to talk to other people about how they're like giving you guys really unfair rates. And which is why the minute that someone even points out like, hey, this deal memo isn't really fair and you maybe shouldn't sign it, they're willing to cut bait on me, which is exactly what they would do to the person who's coming up. If you say, hey, this rate doesn't sound right, I'm going to go talk to my friends about it, they'll be like, oh, you can't. You know, it's like dealing with an abusive boyfriend who's just like gaslighting you all the time. And I've been around enough to see the gaslighting, obviously. Get a little bit of exposure. So where does that leave us? So the world can be full of people who are insecure, who are gaslighters, who will threaten you, who are afraid of things, who are afraid of their box being expanded, who are afraid of their lack of knowledge or experience coming to light. There are people who get insecure that like the rates they offer are low. There are people who get insecure that you listen to music or watch art that they find scary for whatever reason. There are people out there who get bothered by all sorts of things. And one of the hardest things in the midst of running into that is that it's so easy to make it about you, at least for me. And I keep having to remind myself that this isn't about me. I am not doing anything wrong. My intent is to have an open discussion, to help the people who are coming up here, to create more equitable situations for people. And I'm willing to keep having those conversations. And if some people don't like it, that's fine. And if people want to listen to some reputation they have about me without knowing me, then like that's on them too. But know that the people who are all going to listen to people who talk shit aren't people that you want to be friends with anyway. I think the moral of the story for me is that there are people who are always going to be insecure when you try to expand. And there are people who are going to be afraid of you bringing up new ideas. There are people who are going to be afraid of you shining light on practices that are going on, that are unfair, that are controlling. That's always the way it goes. And sometimes you go through a lot of that, and it's really easy to think that it's your fault somehow, but it's not. And there are good people out there. There are people who are very open, who are very safe, who are very willing to have any of these conversations, and that it's worth finding those people. And I think for me, it's also a reminder that, like, no matter what you say, someone's gonna have a problem with it. And I've personally always chosen to say things that educate, that increase transparency, that make the process a little more approachable for everyone, whether it's on the creative side, the financial side, the business side. And I'm going to keep doing that. And I don't know everything. I don't have all the answers. But I can tell you the things that I've learned, and I can tell you the things that don't make sense to me. And if other people don't agree with it, that's on them. So I think I'm going to go back to sharing more. And at this point, I'm okay with the fact that I might get flack for it. Because at this point, I'm aware that the way that the people in the church treated me, or the way my dad treated me, or the way film influencers treated me, or the way production companies treated me, had nothing to do with me and had everything to do with them. And I've done enough looking at myself to know where my weaknesses are. I'm not scot-free in all of this. Like, I'm not some perfect person. But I can say that there's some stuff that's like my part to own, and there's some stuff that's just not. And for me, being honest is not something I'm ever going to be apologetic for. So if you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. And if you don't, moving on. Hopefully this is helpful to someone who has maybe experienced similar things, maybe struggles with similar things. If you find it helpful, let me know. So I'm going to go catch this sunset. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I don't know what else to say.